Hello everyone, welcome back to another Doctor Who Ramble. This time we are talking about Season 2, Episode 6, the Interstellar Song Contest by Juno Dawson. I have been away in Cardiff for the past couple of days. I watched the episode with some friends, so I didn't take notes or anything, so this ramble is going to be a proper ramble. I normally have notes to refer to kind of go through the episode and just give my thoughts as the episode plays out. We don't have that this time, so if there's stuff that I forget to talk about, or if there's characters I don't talk about, if there's storylines I don't talk about, whoopsie, what can you do? So this one's going to be even more all over the place than these usually are. Going into this episode, I was a bit like, ooh, because just seeing the promotional material and stuff like that, I was like, this probably isn't going to be an episode for me. I'm not a big fan of, I guess... I was afraid it was going to be like super overly camp, which just isn't for me. And, having people like Rylan and Graham Norton actually in the episode as themselves, for me personally, I just don't like that. I don't like it in Doctor Who. I don't like it in any fictional show, really. When it's like a historical figure and stuff, cool, fine, whatever. When it's, present day celebrities that we as the audience would know in like different settings and stuff, it just really dates episodes for me, and I prefer them just without any of that. I think Doctor Who kind of loses a sort of timeless quality when you include real life people that we as the audience know in present day in episodes. I think it dates it, and if people get cancelled in future, episodes like these, just then going to age like milk, and you don't want this episode to age like milk, so that kind of thing just isn't for me. Obviously that's just a personal thing, I didn't like that going into it, but I did enjoy the episode more than I thought. We were also kind of prepared. Russell said a few weeks back, if there are any episodes that you should watch, try and watch as soon as possible and try not to get spoiled on, it was episode 3, which obviously turned out to be with the well, and episode 6. So despite what the marketing about this episode was kind of making it out to be, I think if you read that interview and you saw that, you would know to kind of expect something more than just like a campy filler episode from this, especially right before the finale. So I went into it thinking like, okay, what's going to happen in this one? What's going to be big? My first thought was we're probably going to find out who Mrs. Flood is, maybe at the end of the episode or something, to lead into the finale, which obviously we did get. And boy oh boy. Honestly, outside of the big reveals, I thought this episode was fine. I don't think it was... for me, this is the weakest of the season. It was still good, but I do think this was the weakest. I think... I get what the episode was going for. I think the messaging and the portrayal of certain things, I think there were some major missteps in terms of what the episode wanted to say. So I wasn't big on the plot aspect of it, I guess, and like the execution of the themes in this one, I think was a bit clumsily done. But the vibes were on point. But I think this is going to be an episode that people talk about, the big 2 cameos in, rather than the actual episode itself. But it was still good. I do still think we've had 6 for 6 of really solid episodes of Doctor Who this season, which is great. Hopefully the finale can kind of hold it all together next week. Well, part 1 next week, obviously. But yeah, I enjoyed the vibes of the episode. I thought the episode looked really good. I do kind of wish we'd seen more of maybe the singers and stuff. Like, it kind of felt a bit Devil's Cordish in the way like Devil's Cord was a musical episode that seemed to be ashamed of being a musical episode, so it wasn't. It was a musical episode without proper music in it for the most part. And this also kind of felt like a Eurovision episode that didn't really want to be a Eurovision episode after 10 minutes or so. It felt like it kind of got bored of its own premise very quickly. I think maybe that's why the plot just wasn't quite there for me. And when you have you bring Rylan into it, that with the budget, could we not have maybe gotten like a brand new alien creature sort of deal? And the other presenter, cool costume, but we've done cat people multiple times now. I'm like, couldn't we have had something new? And I saw there was like a pig person in the crowd, and we've done that a few times. I feel like there was a chance to make the universe just feel interstellar and massive, and we keep just going back to like the same sort of ideas, like, oh, cat person, pig person, oh, here's a bit of stunt casting, let's get a celebrity that British people will know in this episode, and say he's been cryogenically frozen. Like, but what about 2025? Like, are you saying that he was frozen back then, or like things are just ultimately going to be fixed? Don't worry, because he obviously has to get cryogenically frozen and unfrozen every year. Like, what's going on with that? So I think that was a bit muddled, and I just feel like some of that, this episode could have made this universe of Doctor Who feel massive, and we had cat people again, we had a pig person again, we had a celebrity that we know in present day, and like I felt like that was your chance to come up with some new cool creature designs and show them off and make the universe feel a bit bigger, and it just didn't, which was, I thought, was kind of a shame. But still, I thought they captured like the vibe of like the Eurovision Song Contest pretty well. And I've just remembered I haven't made the image appear. There you go. Surprise. And yeah, I enjoyed the kind of vibes of it. I felt like they captured the energy of Eurovision really well. I did enjoy the Doctor and Belinda kind of arriving and very quickly deciding, like, okay, we're obviously staying. Like, this is great. So I liked that. Kind of establishing what this place was, and all of that I thought was done really well. It's like a setup, and especially because like, okay, something's going to go wrong. You see Mrs. Flood in the crowd watching, and checking the Vindicator has done its magic again at this place, and you're like, okay, getting a bit of momentum with that. We obviously had the two people. We had the female. I can't remember what the creatures were called. What those aliens were called with the horns, who were the villains, but also kind of not the villains, because the government's the villain. That's where it gets a bit muddled. We had one like working on the inside. I think one was called Kid or Kit. I think there's a lot of side characters in this one that kind of threw in, because we had the singer who's going to be a contestant as well, and like her manager, agent sort of deal, who was sort of just there. I felt like he was a bit of a nothing character. I did like the twist with the singer, who was actually, she recognised these people who were trying to like hijack the contest and, kill these people, because she was, she was their species as well, and she like had her horns taken off by force, I think she said. She's covering all that up and everything. I thought that was, a nice sort of twist with her character. And then we also had the couple who were trying to get into their seats, and obviously the Doctor and Belinda hijacked that, but then they ultimately helped the Doctor and saved the day. They were quite fun, maybe a bit stereotypical for my taste, but they were fun. But yeah, I think overall the side characters kind of let the side down for me a bit. I didn't get much from a lot of them, and I think the messaging with some of them was a bit muddled. These people who, apparently killed 100,000 or so people that were at the contest, but then ultimately weren't. They were actually frozen and stuff, so we could kind of get them back, and everything was fine. Put it all back in the box. Like, that was kind of a shame that the stakes were lowered. I did like the initial moment of like, oh shit, all these people getting sucked into space, and that shot of like all of them like floating up was amazing. That was one of the best shots this season by far, maybe of this era. So I liked all of that. I did like that escalation, and I did kind of feel it was a bit cheap that it was like, oh, they're just frozen, it's all fine. I guess it's a family show, you can't just kill 100,000 innocent people off like that. But I also felt like, oh, those two aliens, I need to kind of just, maybe I should Google what their characters are called. There was definitely Kid, Interstellar Song Contest cast. This is why, friends, I like to make notes normally. Freddie Fox plays Kid, so we have Kid, Win, Kid and Win, I think, were the two who were kind of like trying to hijack the event and kill these people, because their planet had been kind of drained of their honey, I think. So it's kind of like this big revenge plot, because they lost their home, really. They kind of lost the heart of who they were. So I like the kind of sympathetic side they did with that. And what Kid was kind of saying was, I'm just doing what you expected of us, because obviously their race is looked down upon, and people are kind of just racist against their kind. So Kid's response is just I'll just be the monster that you've painted me as. And I like the messaging of that, but you have still just made them the villains of the episode who are trying to kill all these people. So I'm like, but you have just kind of villainized them. I get what point you're trying to make, but, you know, if there was like a twist and like, oh, it was actually someone else was in charge and they're being framed, fine. But you have still just made them the villain. So I feel like that point didn't really land. Especially because at the end, Kid was just like, oh, I'll see you again, Doctor. You know, I'll get you for this. I'm like, maybe, you know, he should have had that moment when he's like, oh shit, I nearly killed so many people, and he just became as bad as the people who, you know, ruined our home. And he kind of, you know, at least begins to see the error of his ways, but he was unrepentant. And at least on the plus side, Win, you know, we could tell she was a bit like, oh, there's a lot of moments of like uncertainty from her, but I just felt that that message was completely kind of lost in translation and just completely muddled. And I'm like, I get what you were going for, but I felt like you handled that really poorly, because you still just have made them try to commit these atrocities. You know, and if we'd actually like maybe seen some of the people who did these horrible things to their home, and like seen some like government representatives or something, and have them as characters in the episode, so you can see that okay, they are the villains because they're obviously so much worse, but actually seeing them as characters in the episode, the fact that they're just like this absent thing, we just talk about what they've done rather than actually see it. I think that also just makes these guys feel like the villains even more, and they kind of shouldn't be, but kind of should be. And it's like the episode wants you to feel sorry for them, but also, you know, treats them as villainous. Very much, I think, like what was his name? The Al in the Robot Revolution. The muddling of that, and like, are we supposed to feel sorry for him? Are we not? That kind of, you know, I felt like the episode kind of got a bit messy with that in Robot Revolution. I felt the same thing sort of happened here, although this felt a bit more potentially harmful. So I wasn't sure about that, and you know, the fact that the singer who kind of like, you know, had her horns taken off and wore the wig to cover it and everything, you know, she kind of hid away from these atrocities, and you know, ultimately brings their song back and like sings their song because it's the song that needs to be heard. You know, should she be getting the credit for that? Should everyone be applauding her for that? I don't know. I feel like this episode had so much it wanted to do with that concept, but it also had to be a Eurovision episode. It also had to reveal who Mrs. Flood was. It also had so many side characters that ultimately didn't matter. It also had Susan cameos. You know, I feel like there was just too much to juggle to actually get the point of the episode across properly. So there just wasn't time. I feel like a lot of the episode just felt a bit underbaked plot-wise for me, and a bit messy. And I don't think that's necessarily Gina Dawson's fault. I just think what had to be included in this episode was just so much that there just wasn't time to tell the story that it was mostly trying to tell. It tried to be morally grey, but I think it ended up just being grey, because I wasn't really sure about anything in the end. The actual plot of this episode and the main crux of the story, I was like, okay, I think the messaging was a bit all over the place there. And the Doctor's journey, I liked seeing Ncuti get pissed off and scary, and you know, him like torturing Kid was brutal. And you know, Belinda coming in and seeing that, and then it's just like, oh, it's fine, let's hug. You know, I feel like again that was really underbaked and really rushed. You know, I think they wanted 15 to have like a Waters of Mars, Time Lord Victorious moment, and I could see something like this being the straw that broke the camel's back. I totally see that, but I just feel like we haven't had enough anger from Ncuti up to this point to be like, okay, you know, he's getting more and more pressured here, and now he's snapping, you know? Especially when this is the Doctor who's supposed to be like fully healed, and you know, it's a fresh, bold start. It's just like we're doing the same old stuff again now. So I think they really rushed that moment of the Doctor just losing it in the way he did. I feel like it just wasn't earned. And again, because this episode had to do so much, there just wasn't time to build up to that properly. Popping in again with just an iPad camera, so sorry it's not the same quality, but I was just editing this and going through and talking about this just made me again think of the fact that, the Doctor is like torturing this guy and really like leaning into the fact that this is the villain. We should be villainizing him, and the fact that there's not really any consequence to the Doctor's actions there, and he isn't called out for it, and it's just like, okay, that's fine. It just again adds to sort of the messy idea of like, so is what Kid's trying to do, is Kid the villain then? Because, it seems like it's saying the Doctor torturing him was the right thing to do because there wasn't a consequence. We didn't have the moment like Waters of Mars where Adelaide, unalives herself to show the 10th Doctor that he's wrong to be, doing the kind of things that he was trying to do. So again, it just continues to feel muddled and a bit like, maybe mishandled. And, we didn't get the Doctor and Belinda really talking about that afterwards. It feels like something that episode 1 Belinda in particular, like, would have and should have still been really bothered by seeing him do that, but it's just completely glossed over. Belinda very much feels like someone who would address that like right away and call him out for that. I think Ruby would probably just gloss over it and roll with it, but that didn't feel true to Belinda's character to, just move on from that. And kind of, that moment at the end where she's like, oh, you're wonderful, because she said like, oh, when she thought he was dead, she's like, oh, I never got to tell him that I think he's wonderful or anything. I'm like, I feel like you wouldn't think he's wonderful after what you just witnessed him do. So again, it just didn't feel right. It didn't feel earned. It felt just very underbaked. So yeah, that was a bit... but when they all get sucked out of space and everything, I did like... I mean, it's ridiculous, and I don't think that's how physics works. It's like the scene... I can't remember what story it is. It's a Peter Davison story. I think it might be Four to Doomsday, when... he gets back on board the space station by like throwing a cricket ball. He's floating in space, he throws a cricket ball, it bounces off the station, he grabs it, and then that momentum kind of pushes him out again and like gets him back to where he needs to go. If this felt like a reference to that, with like the glitter cannon or whatever it was. It's a very 15 object to kind of use to, do this. I just don't know if that's how it actually would have worked, but I think it was kind of more so a reference, which I did like. So, they had some fun moments in there that I do think worked. And the bits where let's have a look what the characters' names, those two, what are they called, Mike and Gary, the two guys, when they were both like, I would do anything for you. real honestly, I love relatable characters. They would just do anything for the Doctor. Hilarious. So I liked that. I did like them. I think they were the more successful side characters for me, because their story was kind of just more straightforward and their arc was kind of clear, and I think you could tell they were really unsure about the Doctor, also terrified of him, and they also fancied him. So I feel like all their actions in the episode were kind of justifiable and made sense, which I can't really say about all the others. The singer's manager just, he finds out that she's actually like this other species, and he's like, we're done, blah 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 blah. And I feel like, again, just him changing his mind and that turnaround just doesn't feel earned, and it's just so quick, and it's just like, I don't feel anything about this, I'm sorry, I just don't. So yeah, I think character and plot wise this episode does fall short a lot for me. I just feel like maybe an extra 5 or 10 minutes, or juggling less things that it had to juggle. I feel like that would have given it the time to maybe allow these things to breathe and feel a bit more earned and make a lot more sense. Because, it was great to have all those Susan cameos, and it's so cool that they're actually doing something with the Susan setup from last season. Or I hope so. I hope this isn't just it, but it's lovely that Carol Ann Ford's got a chance to come back to the show and just hang out in the TARDIS for a day, just like serving looks and just going, ooh, grandfather. So hopefully that is going somewhere. Hopefully we see her in the finale. Otherwise that does feel a bit like, okay, great to see her, but why now? Why is the Doctor seeing her now? He's been in mortal peril and dying all sorts of times. Why has he not seen her until now? So if that's not going anywhere, that would be a bit strange. And again, when there could have been, even that could have been just a couple of minutes that could have been given to something else in the episode to let that breathe a bit more. I am wondering, like, where's that going? But it's very exciting, very cool surprise, given that, the Doctor Who leaks happen quite a lot. particularly this series, there's been a lot of leaks. And I did know through those leaks, as soon as episode 3 turned out to be a midnight sequel, which leaked, and Joe Martin showing up last week was also kind of in there. Also in there was that Mrs. Flood was going to be revealed to be the Rani, and that she was going to bioregenerate. So when all that started coming true, I was like, okay, that's where that's going to go then. That's who Mrs. Flood's going to be. But Susan was a complete surprise for me. So that was really lovely to see her just pop up, and you're like, holy shit. And that's going to be a holy shit moment for a lot of people, which is cool. And I think the same with the Rani reveal. The fact that, Mrs. Flood mentions she's a time lady, and we actually see her regenerate or biogenerate. She mentioned she's the Rani, and, I feel like that reveal was done so much better than the Sutek reveal at the end of last season, where new viewers are kind of just supposed to expect and just be amazed by this, by Sutek, without any foreknowledge of who it's supposed to be and no setup. It's not like, Sutek got a mention at any point prior to that, other than just vaguely talking about, he who waits or whatever that was. It's kind of like in series 1, you had Dalek, which established the Daleks, so when they come back in the finale, it's like, oh shit. You see the Cybermen earlier in series 2, and you already know of the Daleks, so then the series 2 finale happens, you're like, oh shit. We've done 3 years of Last of the Time Lords, and the Fobwatch in the Human Nature 2-parter. So when the Master's brought into it, okay, it's one of the Doctor's people, he's hidden away, holy shit. Davros comes back, we see Davros throughout the Stolen Earth, but then he has a scene where you explain who he is, and things like that, and that just wasn't done for Sutek, and I think that turned a lot of people off. When I watched that episode with my dad, he was just like, okay. There's just the casual viewers just aren't going to know who that was, and there needs to be a bit more of a build up, kind of like what I really liked what they did with the toy maker in The Giggle, when the Doctor realises who this is, and they just have quick flashes of you see William Hartnell and you see the toy maker from that first story he was in. If they'd just done something like that with the Sutek reveal, would have allowed the stakes to have actually been okay, the audience who aren't familiar with this would understand oh shit, this is a big deal, which they just didn't get with Sutek. They were just told to be impressed, and I don't think it really followed through on that. But this, bringing back a time lady, and showing process of regeneration, it's just a much better villain, I think, to bring back for the first time, because there's still so much about the Rani that you're just familiar with anyway, in regards to just Doctor Who as a show, and obviously the Rani was only in 2 stories, and Dimensions in Time, but we don't talk about that. But it was just, I think, a much better handled reveal. Although F in the chat for anyone who just turns off as soon as the credits start and actually missed that. Waiting 2 years for Mrs. Flood answers, and they might have missed it because the credits started rolling, they just switched off. Hilarious that bioregeneration is this myth, it was a myth until recently. This incredibly rare myth, and that's 2 regenerations in a row now that have actually been bioregenerations. So maybe not that rare. I do like the new Rani. She feels a lot more Rani-esque than Mrs. Flood does. Because, it was all very well and good when they brought back the Master, but he didn't really act like the Master in the classic series, very much so. But, the Rani that kind of came from this biogeneration, she felt a lot more prim and proper and, scientifically based. So that was cool. I do think it's a shame that we spent a year and a half focused on Mrs. Flood, and she has now been immediately relegated to she's not the important one. She is, it's like Susan Twist last series. We're all focusing on, what's this woman going to be? What's going on with her? And not only is she then just relegated to just one of Sutek's sort of slaves. She's not the only Sutek slave, because you had Harriet Arbinger, and then you brought Mel into it as well, so she felt even less important, and she was the arc. So the fact that we've now been waiting nearly 2 years to learn what the hell's going on with Mrs. Flood, to see her immediately relegated to the second most important Rani, I do feel is a bit of a shame. So yeah, that's interesting. I wonder if they are going to explain why she kept breaking the fourth wall, and then just like stopped after the robot revolution. It feels like that's when Russell decided who she was going to be. I was like, okay, it does actually make sense for the Rani to break the fourth wall, so I'm just going to say that she stops doing it, and too late to go back and undo the others, I guess. So maybe they'll explain that. I'm scared they won't, but we'll see. But it is in the Rani's nature to disguise herself, so I get that. We kind of saw her dressed in a very like Clara-esque outfit at the end of the last series, and also the big like white like furry coat she had at the very end of Empire of Death. A lot of people compare that to, I think it was Romana 1's coat that she wore at times, and in the classic series the Rani did disguise herself as Mel, so her kind of dressing as the Doctor's companions has also been sort of a thing with her character. So there are some things that make sense to this, and I do like that it is the Rani. I think it was about time the Rani came back, so I am happy and satisfied with that, like Mrs. Flood is the Rani. Mostly because I still don't know about the fourth wall breaking stuff. I'm really hoping there's some reason for that. And like, is this going to be like Beep the Meep's boss? Because we still don't know who the fuck that is. So maybe that's going to be the Rani. That'd be fun if that ties things together. How is this going to tie into Space Babies? With the Space Baby coming back last week, what's going on with that? All sorts of craziness. But yeah, I don't know if we've really documented it because I haven't talked about the specials or anything. I think the concept of bioregeneration is stupid and shouldn't happen, but I guess you just kind of have to roll with this. I think the idea of two Ranis might have been interesting, but the fact that Mrs. Flood already feels less important isn't a good sign for me going forward. But I do like the look and feel of this new Rani and what her plan is going to be for the Doctor, how she's going to get her revenge after all these years, and why now? Why is the Rani showing up now? Why wait all this time? Why disguise herself as Mrs. Flood for all this time? So lots of questions, but we still do have 2 episodes to answer it all. And now we actually know Mrs. Flood is the Rani, I can actually kind of give a toss about the storyline, which I just haven't felt any connection to up till now. So yeah, that'll be interesting. And I think Bonnie Langford must be in the finale. I'm pretty sure she was in the trailer for this series. So to see Mel and the Rani hopefully reunite will be really fun. And it is nice to have a different Time Lord villain that we can kind of keep bringing back if we need to. I do think the Master needs quite a long rest, but I'm also kind of thinking like, is the Rani the one that picked up the Toymaker's tooth that the Master had been turned into? And is the Master also coming back next week? Who can say? There's all sorts that could potentially happen, and we're just going to have to wait and see and hope the finale kind of pays all this off. But yeah, again, I feel like I haven't really gone into as many specifics as I would normally like to. But yeah, I don't think there were as many like little moments that really stood out for me in this one, or like little character beats that really stood out for me in this one, because I just feel like it was quite muddled this time around, and just very underbaked overall. As great as it was to have all those Susan moments, why now, and where's it going? Does it mean anything? There wasn't even a hint of an explanation for it. It's just like, be impressed, Susan's back. I'm like, I'll be impressed if this goes somewhere good. Overall, I do think this was probably the weakest episode of the series for me so far. I just think a bit undercooked. I think there were just too many ideas in this that it meant nothing was fully explored in the way that it should have been, and some things were just rushed and not earned. And this is an episode of like, wow, cool moments, rather than, I think solid story. And right from the off, just the inclusion of like real life celebrities and stuff like Graham Norton. Hilarious that Graham Norton is like finally in Doctor Who after 2 mishaps surrounding him. I guess that's fun. But also, it's not for me when they kind of do that sort of thing. But yeah, I'm going to stop there because I really would just properly be rambling about nothing, because, I can't remember too much else about the episode. So if there is anything that I did feel at the time, I've forgotten. But yeah, the episode was good. I think it was still solid. I'd probably give it maybe like 2.5 or 3 Ranis out of 5. let's go for that. It was a fine, decent episode. I do think outside of, the big returns, I don't think it's a particularly memorable one. But yeah, it was fine. I had a good time watching it. I didn't loathe it at any point. I wasn't like, this is terrible. I do think this, continues season 2's, decent quality of like, okay, good episode, excellent, let's keep going with that. And I eagerly anticipate what the finale is going to do with all this, and hopefully it does all come together and doesn't all fall apart like season 1 did for me. We'll have to wait and see. Let me know your thoughts on the episode in the comments. Are you excited for next week? What are your theories of what's going to happen? And yeah, what's your favourite episode of the series so far? Let me know. Mine's probably still The Well, I think. I did really enjoy that episode. And I will see you when I see you.